Hi, my name's Lee Jasper. This is Brixton, London, and you're watching Lee Jasper Drive Time.
Morning to Lee Jasper Drive Time. Another week has gone by, and can I just welcome you all to our show, the Lee Jasper Drive Time. As you know, we get on air every Saturday morning between 10 and 12, really just trying to deal with some black authenticity, some real grit and grind about the issues that affect our community. First of all, can I say thank you for watching, because without you, there'd be no point really, would there? So can we warm up our audience this morning by just starting a watch party amongst your friends, or sharing the link to say that Lee Jasper Live is on the air and we're ready to roll? We'd be delighted if you could support us in that way. And what a momentum week it is. But before I get on to that now, let's be clear about the nature of the show. The show is an interactive show. It really requires your active participation. What do I mean by that? Well, it's news you can use, because what we don't want is a show that is just a paralysis of analysis, continually poring over what we know to be the issues and what's wrong. What we want is a solution-focused outcome to our discussions. Yes, we're going to educate you on some of the stats and facts in relation to the school to prison pipeline, which is my chosen subject today. Yes, Hopper Hendrickson from Leeds. Good to see you this morning, sir, on fire. Share and make sure we get other people online as I warm up the audience before we bring in our special guest. So do push that share and like button all the while. So it's news you can use. And by that, what do I mean? I just mean that you can add resources, post website links to discussion, tell us where there are projects in your area that can assist. We want this to be an empowerment program. And the way that works is that, yeah, we've got experts on here, but you're the expert in your area. And you can post links to say, look, in Manchester, in Liverpool, in Birmingham, or wherever you may be, that here are projects that can assist and help in this regard. So it's news you can use. And I want you to be active in posting that. You also can ask our great panelists some questions. Be interactive, get involved in the program, because they stay online forever. That means anybody who wants to look at black exclusions and where they could get help, or our previous programs about black men's mental health, black women's mental health, and indeed domestic violence, which if you didn't see the show last week with our sisters on domestic violence, you've really got to go back and see that show. So it's a subject that we don't discuss enough. And I'm going to make no apologies for continually returning to the subject of black men and their involvement in domestic violence. Good morning, Rosaline Daisy, over there in East London, or is it Lewisham? I can't remember, one of the two. She's got a great book out and was on the show last week. And if you didn't see it, look on the show last week and look up for her Amazon link about Wide Awake in a Dream. How one woman went through to hell and back and survived to prosper, as well as Alison. If you didn't see Alison's testimony last week, my God, I'm sorry I'm taking up time on domestic violence, but I'm coming back to it time and time again until we see a reduction in the number of black women who are subject to it. But the subject today is the school to prison pipeline. But I couldn't do this subject really any justice at all without first thanking our sponsors. So let me just do that. Black Socks, the social movement. You'll see their address coming along the screen shortly. And we are proud to have Black Sock sponsor. I'm a Black Sock sponsor. So I sponsor them and they sponsor me. That's the way it works. One hand washing the other. And Section 109. You don't know much about that, but you're going to know a lot about it, because I'm about to do some great in-depth documentary interviews about the issues affect us, full-length documentaries with Section 109. I'm delighted to have their sponsorship this morning. Couldn't do the program today without talking about George Floyd. I'm dressed in black because that's my mood. This week, let me just reveal to you on the George Floyd situation. I've been confused. I've been angry. I've been mortified. I've been nauseated to the point where I wanted to throw up, all in equal measure, in relation to the murder of George Floyd. Not just me, I think the whole world has become traumatized by his death. And I wear black today in mournful respect for George and his family, and the thousands of others in the international African diaspora, the most persecuted ethnicity on the face of the planet in human history. Today, I wear black in mourning for my people. The sickening 8 minutes and 43 seconds of that murder have hung on my mind like a 10-ton weight for the entirety of this week. Each second of that brutal murder that ticked away was like an eternity as we watched. And to be honest, I couldn't watch it all. But as we watched the life ebb away from the body of our dear brother. And we ask ourselves, and we have to ask ourselves, given the topic of today's program, the school to prison pipeline, what is the psychological effect of these traumas, of this trauma, of George Floyd's public execution on the minds of our children? I'm going to give you my insight as a parent and as somebody who's been in the field of fighting against death in custody for 40 years? Feels like an eternity. But black children, our children, your children, live in fear and dread of the police. That's the psychological outcome of the terrorism of racism in the minds of our young people. They believe, and this won't be popular, they believe, and I think there's some truth into this, that us, their parents, have fundamentally let them down because we've not done enough to protect them from a racism that's not invented in 2020, that was invented in 1620, and for which every decade and century since then has rolled on relentless. Yes, we've pushed the barriers back, but we haven't lifted the trauma of racism from the minds of our children. Well, I'm proud to say that over the last 40 years, I've tried to work consistently, urging a much more radical approach to tackle racism. And you know what? During that time, I've had black people tell me that racism is not that bad. That I've been labelled by my own community, by some, as an extremist. That we're making progress, Lee. That you're a racial conspiratorial theorist, Lee. That you're just making it up so that you can gain more profile, and lots of other meaningless accusations made by the spineless who are too weak and insipid to really face down this beast that we call white supremacy. And I've watched our people compromise for chunk change, diversity solutions that have produced no progress whatsoever. They're happy to receive the Queen's shilling, and I've seen minuscule progress described as stunning advances for our cause. I've seen the black bourgeoisie happy to reduce structural racism to an intellectual management exercise in a diversity headcount. Even on their own terms, these people have failed our communities. Our generation has failed our children. They now live in morbid terror of the racism that we see and all know to be too real. Surely it is the historical and destiny of any generation to leave the world, to bequeath a world that is better than the one that they received from their parents to their children. Surely it is better for a generation to fight to bequeath a world that is better for its children than the one bequeathed to it from the previous generation. Our parents, our Windrush generation, fought like hell to lift the burden of racism for us so that we didn't go through what they went through. And yet today, we have the terrifying prospect of bequeathing to a world, bequeathing to our children, Black children, African heritage children, a world that is worse than the one that we inherited from our parents. Listen to me good. That must be the greatest abrogation of parental responsibility of any community ever. No community can survive where generations allow the world to become worse for their children in each successive generation. And from the time that the first African left the plantation and said, hell no, I'm not slaving for you all. I'd rather burn the master's house down and escape this dread. That's when our resistance started. And it seems that in the new millennium, all we can do is watch our people compromise and sell out the future to our children. As Reverend Al Sharpton said, I don't know if you saw the memorial for George Floyd, but as Reverend Al Sharpton said so eloquently, white people's knees are still on our neck. Some black people are aiding and abetting in that process. But let me go on for today. I'd send condolences to the family of George Floyd. But we're going to bring you a global program, Black Sox Global, where we're going to show you that this is not an American phenomenon. That 14-year-old boy in Brazil was shot to death by the police just 3 weeks ago. That a man in Australia shouted, "I can't breathe," 21 times on film, killed by Australian prison guards. That Adam Traoré in France was suffocated in a routine ID check by the gendarme army, police service in France. I'm going to take you through the international roster call of shame that shows our people are the most victimized ethnicity on the face of this planet. So stay tuned for Black Sox Global. I'm going to be doing more on George Floyd. I want you to share what you've just heard and seen. I want it to provoke debate and engagement. But today our program is about the school to prison pipeline. And let me just say my thoughts on this before we bring in our panel. Can I apologize? I've taken a little longer than normal today. And I make no apologies for it in the introduction. Because my head is heavy. My heart is hurting. I just needed to get that said and off my chest. But in relation to today's subject, listen, a combination of school exclusions, racial profiling by the police, all add up to disproportionately criminalize our communities. They use a disproportionate amount of force when it comes to black arrest. And we all know that relates to the George Floyd murder, how black men are demonized, black boys are demonized. They're treated by the police as if they are some superhuman terrorist criminal, even when they pose no threat. And it's that toxic mix that provides the backdrop to the downpression. You don't know that word, do you? Downpression. That's what we're living through. A downpression that is based on our communities. Let me just say this about British racism, because I heard some black Tory minister, Kimmy Badenoch, say that Britain was one of the best countries in the world to be black. British racism is relentless. It is vicious. It destroys ambition. It eviscerates opportunity. It maims. It kills. It criminalizes. Drives us mad. The fact is, and here I'm speaking to the white audience, I don't know whether there'll be many, but I'm speaking to you, the white audience, the people who are primarily responsible for the condition that we face. Yours is the responsibility for racism. Your ignorance and silence on this issue of structural racism has made you utterly complicit in the state-sponsored persecution and denial of opportunity that has become the daily reality for African and Caribbean communities. The primary responsibility of racism lies with white people, lies with you. And whilst the organizations and white institutions and white politicians and so on fail in their responsibilities in this regard, it is us that pick up the price for that failure. We see the outpouring of emotion from white people today in relation to George Floyd. And we say, where were you when Mark Duggan was killed? We say, where were you when Sean Rigg was killed? We say, where were you when Sarah Reid met her awful fate in Pentonville prison? Yeah, we see you now. Where were you for the Windrush victims? We see you now. But where were you when Rashan Charles died on film just like George? Where were you? We see you, but we ask, where the hell have you been? And the question we now ask is, are you going to stick around for the real fight against dismantling your own white privilege and structural inequality and racism? Privileges which you've enjoyed and you've been complicit in for hundreds of years. Or will this emotional wave of sympathy refuse to translate to empathy and real anti-racist action on your part? Only time will tell. May George Floyd rest in peace. May the living rise in anger. Let's say about exclusions. You know, the criminal justice industry in the United Kingdom is worth £8 billion a year. Yeah, you want to hear me say that again? £8 billion a year. The Guardian reported in 2010 that it cost £140,000 to keep one young person in jail for a year. The cost to send that young person to Eton or Cambridge, the premier universities, is £35,000. We prefer to send people to jail at enormous expense rather than invest in them and send them to university. Our children, through the process of school exclusions and racial profiling, have become the raw material, the commodity that feeds a massive criminal injustice enterprise that monetizes racism into an incredibly profitable industry. When we go to jail, everybody gets paid. The pupil referral unit staff get paid. The police officer gets paid. The court usher gets paid. The judge gets paid. The probation officer gets paid. Our children are being force-fed as the new raw material to ensure the profitability of the prison industrial complex. The fact is that black children are worth more in jail than they are on the road. That's a simple economic calculation. And these figures, I think, demonstrate that. Over the last, the arrest rate for black children has increased by 100%. Let me say that again. 100% from 2008 to 2018. Did you know that? Were you paying attention? Over the last 5 years, black children receiving a sentence increased from 13% to 21%. Increased every year over the last 5 years. And the number of black children on remand in custody has risen from 21% to 33% from 2008 till now, over the last 20 years, 20 odd 12 years. It's gone up from 21% to 33%. Exclusions, according to the government's own figures, over 50,000 African children were temporarily excluded from school last year. And the government figures suggest that over 2,300 were permanently excluded from school. That's if you believe the government figures. Because you and I know many of our children get lost in the system. Nobody wants to count black excluded kids until they go to jail. If you're off the books, you're off the books. Why count you? Sign of your own failure that you excluded them? I don't believe the figures are robust. The Children's Commissioner, Anne Longfield, warned there is an extensive evidence that linking school exclusions with, in quotes, gang involvement. Pupil referral units, she said, were viewed as the place where the vulnerable young people get first-hand exposure to an experience of crime. To give you a sense of scale, since 2008 to 2018, over 300,000, let me say that again for you, 300,000 black children have suffered temporary exclusions and over 6,000 have been permanently excluded. And that's if you believe those figures. Areas such as Birmingham, Croydon, Hackney, Ealing, Enfield, Haringey, Harrow, Lambeth, Lewisham, Moss Side in Manchester, Wolverhampton, all feature greatly in the top 10 of those areas that are excluding our kids. And we all know the stop and search figures. I'm not going to research them there. But according to figures released by the Youth Justice Board, and if you don't believe these figures, go onto the Race Equality Audit website of the government or the Ministry of Justice and look for them yourselves. They're accessible. That's where I got them from. According to the figures by the Youth Justice Board, black children were four times more likely than white children to be arrested. So that's the grim picture that we're looking at, the criminalization of our young people, how they end up in violent confrontation with the police because of a racial profiling, a downpression, a school exclusion that makes them more vulnerable, that forces them, that guides them, that grooms them into the criminal justice system. Well, today I've got some incredible guests, fantastic and beautiful, looking lovely in lockdown guests, and they are the fabulous Patricia Lamour, MBE. You don't know Patricia Lamour, you need to Google and look her up. Aspire Education Group, private consultant, one of the most successful private head mistresses of a private school, Medina School in Gambia, West Africa, for 8 years. Took that school to the top. She's been widely recognized as a leading educationist, analyst, and a consultant. And I'm glad to say she's with us today. Daniel Pink from Lewisham. Mr. Pink is responsible for family health at ISIS and the Ubuntu Social Living Networks. If you don't know ISIS, I love that. Say hello to Esther for me. I've worked with her for so many years in Peckham. He works in Loving Life Learning and Community Leadership Program. He's worked across education, mental health, criminal justice, social services for over 20 years. He's a qualified youth and community worker, and he works with projects such as MadinaNet, a national program. I hope I said that right, Daniel. MadinaNet, national program that ran across the primary and secondary schools in London and Lewisham. We've also got Delhi Addition, and Delhi is a man of very many attributes. He's a barrister. His particular area of expertise is in employment law, often advising on discrimination and unfair dismissal claims. As a youth and community engagement consultant, he often advises local government and voluntary sector orgs in the UK on how best they can improve and have meaningful engagements with the black community. Often shining a lens on disproportionality, Delhi prides himself on challenging inequality within our society head on and strives for a better quality of life for our community. Welcome, Delhi. Do we have Gwenton with us? Maybe not. In that case, I shall go on to Simon Morley, who's the managing director and co-founder of Mixed Foundations Mentoring and Therapeutic Service in Nottingham. He's a youth practitioner and a mentor, and served as a qualified practitioner and has been working with young people for over 13 years. He's got a proven track record of engaging some of the most difficult youth and ambient inner city youth and empowering them. Ambivalent ambient youth. It's ambivalent youth, and he's highly motivated and passionate about working with young people. His specialism is working with individuals involved in gang culture and serious youth violence. We're also awaiting to be joined by Gwenton Slowly. If anybody knows where Gwenton Slowly is, tell him to get online. I think I see him coming now, making a fashionably late Hollywood entrance into the Lee Jasper Drive Time studio. Gwenton Slowly, what can I say about this man that you don't already know already? He's a fantastic youth practitioner. He has written a book, From Street to Scotland Yard, and he's worked in housing sector as a specialist in relation to housing ex-offenders and vulnerable young people. This is the man that moves your kids when they're under threat of their life at the dead of night. He's been doing that for over 10 years. He became involved in the professional development of professionals in a bunch of related sectors through his training and his books. And he's made a point of remaining rooted in his community, for which he serves and does public service. He's recognised as having saved more lives than any individual working in the violence sector over the last 10 years. And he quantifies it in terms of money. He says he saved the state £42 million during that period, because in that time he saved at least 2 lives a year, and the cost of investigating a murder is at least £1.7 million. He delivers these services not on a 9-to-5 basis. He's like the fourth emergency service for the black community. He'll come out at the dead of night, every night, all night, to save you and yours. So that's my beautiful guest, Gwenton. Glad to have you. I'm going to go first to Patricia Lamour, if you bear with me, guys. And I introduced Patricia early on. Yeah, we're going to get to what action is required. Don't worry about that. This is a Action Jackson edition of Lee Jasper Drive Time, and everybody has been commanded to bring solutions to the issues that they're about to speak of. But you've got to stay with the program. So, Patricia, you are the foremost expert that I know, at least, on the issue of black exclusions and the criminalisation and the prison pipeline. So, please tell us, what's your overview of the current crisis, where we're at? And I do call it a crisis. Some may disagree, but I think it's a fundamental crisis for our children. Give us your overview on the issues at hand. I'm not hearing you at the moment, Patricia. Are you muted?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And thank you for having me, Lee. And I'd like to say hello to everybody who's listening from home. Welcome to you. As Lee said, my name is Patricia Lamour, and I head Aspire Education Group. I would beg to differ. I don't see myself as the expert in black exclusion and criminal justice system. I think there are others outside there who've been really carrying that mantle more. I would see myself as an expert on how things need to change locally and globally. I've been in education and around criminal justice, race, equality for about nearly 40 years. So I'm a veteran in that sense. I'm also a grandmother, and I have 5 children, 3 of them boys. I won't go over any of those statistics, Lee, just to say that you are absolutely right. You've encapsulated all, I think, our feelings about how racism has been on our necks and stopping us from breathing. The question is, what do we do next? this has to be our time now. I think we're at a very particular point in history where George Floyd's death will not be in vain if we have listened and we have heard. Let me go straight to solutions. Let's begin with the end in mind. I think post-lockdown education of our children, number one, has to be trauma-informed. It has to take on board the anxiety that our community is feeling, because we know COVID-19 is impacting us more, particularly in the UK and Europe. Secondly, it has to be African history informed. We have to know who we are and where we come from. And I believe the primary responsibility of that type of work, yes, we should ask the schools to teach it and increase and decolonize the curriculum and expand the curriculum, but the primary responsibility is from us, the parents. We are the number one teachers of our children. And if we are not informed about where we come from, and we cannot pass on an empowered vision of what Blackness and Africanness looks like, then how do we expect the schools to do that? So I said, one, it should be trauma-informed, particularly post-lockdown and post-George Floyd. Secondly, it needs to be African history-informed. And thirdly, it needs to be ethical leadership informed. All of us who are watching, as parents, as people in the communities, as lawyers, as educators, we have to step up and take the leadership mantle. We mustn't shy away and say, oh, is it, shouldn't we? No, 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 no. It is clear what is happening. As I think it's Will Smith who said, racism hasn't just suddenly appeared, it's just being televised, it's being filmed. So it's about ethical leadership and partnership with other organizations. Next, fourthly, it has to be economic informed. At the end of the day, if Africa and the Caribbean were totally in control of their wonderful natural God-given resources, and all that wealth that was there, they were in control of that and using that for the best welfare of their people, do you think we would be in the situation that we are? Do you think we would be as refugees across the world trying to get on boats across the Sahara to get to Europe? Because the wealth is on the continent and in the continent, and through her peoples who've been scattered throughout the diaspora. So at the macro level is economic informed, and as we know, there is now afoot the African Regional Continental Free Trade Agreement. Africa is becoming as one common market, whereas we in the UK have stepped out of the European market. So economically, there is a beginning there of economic unity. Us in our local level, we must see how we can support more Black-led businesses and put our money where our mouth is. And lastly, the answer has to be love informed. Love for ourselves, love for our children, love for our community. So those are some of the solutions at a macro level. In terms of very practical things, before George Floyd, myself and many, many parents and professionals were very, very concerned about what was happening to Black children and vulnerable children during lockdown. We know that many of our children have been excluded. We know that many children weren't learning properly. And even more importantly, they were not, under the old normal, getting the right grades that they deserve. Did you know that over half of Black children are failing their GCSEs under the new normal? Also, that when they do get that far and get their A levels, and they are getting them and getting them very well, that when they apply to university, that 1 in 200 of UCAS applications that come from Black or African applicants are queried to see if there's something wrong with it, if it's false or there's a query, where it's only 1 in 2,000 of white applicants. And if they then finally do get into university, in other words, they've not been excluded, they've managed to get into the higher school groups to get the GCSEs, they've got the GCSEs, they've got the A-level, they pass the institutionalized racism of UCAS to get into university. Once they're in the university now, the outcomes, because Black and white students, again, there's a racial disparity. I've got the figures here. 80% of white university students get a first or an upper second. 8 out of 10, or 80 out of 100. Whereas only 57.5% of our Black students get a first or an upper second university degree. And this is with the same entrance qualification. So they both started at the same point in terms of academic entrance qualifications, so in terms of their A-level. And when you're at university, you are hardly taught by a Black lecturer. There are hardly any Black lecturers in the 21,000 universities. This is also in the schools. In the 24,500 schools that exist that teaches the 8.5 million children in the UK, the number of Black male head teachers is under 50. Actually, the last figure I saw was 35. So that's why things of the old normal need to change post-lockdown. And that is why Aspire Education Group is running a historic survey, a 2-part survey, to get the views of the African and Caribbean communities of what post-lockdown education needs to look like. It will only take 10 minutes of your time. So if you know a Black child in school, whether you're a grandparent, an uncle, an aunt, a mother, a father, whoever, a guardian, a foster carer, you've heard all the statistics. You know that things need to change for your children. Make your views heard. You'll see the running across the bottom, how you can get more information. So we want 5,000 views captured on our survey. So we're capturing the views of parents and carers. We're also capturing the views of teachers and those specialist support workers. Anybody who works in schools, particularly in London and Birmingham, Manchester, know that many of the key workers are brought in to engage many of our Black children because they've been disengaging or their behavioural problems are Black. These key support workers, they have barely any proper recognition, proper qualification stairway, accreditation and supervision. We want to capture their views too, because they know what's been happening. They're right close to the coalface in terms of what is happening with our children. So take the time, please. Take that survey. We then undertake to co-author a report, which we will make available to you, the parents, the communities, to the school leaders, to the school policymakers. Let them not say they don't know and there is no evidence. I am tired of reading reports that are supposed to make things better for African and Caribbean children, and we haven't authored them, we haven't decided what the questions are, and we haven't come to our conclusions. This is going to be different. And that's why we have to make our voices heard, and we need to have it written down in a book that we can wave under everybody, and all those brilliant community-based organizations, academics, teachers, supplementary schools, West Side, East Side, Young Leaders Academies, Manhood Academy Global, Lewisham Education Group, Access UK, you name them, all those people who've been fighting to do right by our people, they can use this study when we complete it to leverage that they get more resources and that they can continue to do more of what they're doing. So thank you. I hope I haven't spoken too long, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
There can never be too long a conversation, Pat, when we're dealing with the future of our children. And you heard it there, parental engagement, love straight off the back foot. We don't love our children sufficiently enough to take care of their education.
Mm-hmm.
We'll ask the question, what kind of love it is that allows us to see them continually be challenged by this system in terms of their exclusion and failure. Economics, absolutely important. You know, Pat, you'll know I've been a long advocate that we should be building our own black schools. I know it's deeply controversial. I know some people won't agree, but my view is that we've got to build our own institutions. And I'm hoping the next generation can fulfill that. And we can see a black university and secondary schools open up in Birmingham, Manchester and London and elsewhere. I also think that the survey, it'll take you 10 minutes of your time, and you can see the link for the survey scrolling across the bottom of your screen. This is not somebody else doing their survey and getting paid millions by somebody else to survey and tell us back what we already know. This is our survey, surveying our people. And that survey is going to focus on black teachers, black parents, but also the unsung heroes and sheroes of schools when it comes to black children, teaching assistants. Nobody pays them any mind, but these people are often making the difference in schools, in talking to our children and keeping them on focus, on track, right? And black teaching assistants, they just don't get any love from anybody, but we're giving them love from the Lee Jasper Drive Time. And this survey is all about you. So please make sure you share the survey and share it with as many people as is possible. We're going to move swiftly on. And I normally take age before beauty, but on this one, I reversed that and took beauty before age. But now going back to that tradition, I'm going to introduce Daniel Pink, who is an educator over in Lewisham, except I'm seeing the spinning white ball of death on his screen, which means he's lost his connection. And as we're doing this live, one has to cope with the unexpected. So I'll go over to Deji, if I may, while I wait for Daniel to be reconnected. Deji, as I introduced him, is a barrister, has done some great work in relation to these issues and indeed his own professional sector, which is employment law discrimination. I'm going to come back to you on that, Deji. You know how many people I have to advocate for in terms of racism in the workplace? And I didn't know you were a specialist. So we're learning something today. You're going to be part of that team. I'm going to refer people to you. But Deji, talk to us, my man.
Thank you very much, Lee. And thank you, Patricia. Also. Just first of all, I would like to give my condolences to George Floyd and his family. I echo what you were saying earlier in terms of those horrific events and the trauma witnessing his murder. It's still having an impact on me today. And, you know, even just listening, though I know the stats and the figures that you were mentioning in your introduction, I can't help but it's like a hammer to my heart. I'm actually just feeling quite tense, quite annoyed, quite angry at the level of disparity, the level of discrimination that we in the black community, especially in Britain, that we feel. So, you know, I was sitting here and I was thinking about what I wanted to share, and I was just thinking back to my time at university when I was studying law undergrad, and I remember doing family law, and they came up with this, at the time, this was around 2002, and we were looking ahead to laws that were about to come into play. And at the time, we had a discussion around what is now the Gender Recognition Act 2004. And the Gender Recognition Act, if you haven't heard of it before, it allows people who have gender dysphoria to change their legal gender. So essentially, if you were born a man, then what the law allows is that if you feel that you are a woman, then the law would recognise that you were born as a woman. And I remember in that lecture saying to the lecturer, could we have something like a race recognition act? Could there be something that would recognise the Black experience that we have in the UK, especially when it comes to schooling and employment? And the lecturer turning back to me saying, well, why would you ask for such a legislation? And I said, well, quite simply, I fear for my route out of university. Some of the stuff that Patricia was commenting on in terms of my employment prospects, in terms of my grades and such like. And he said, well, Deji, we have a legislation for this. We have the Race Relation Act 1976. And what that does is it prohibits discrimination on the grounds of your colour. And so no one should prevent you from getting housing. No one should prevent you from getting employment simply because the colour of your skin. And I looked at him and I kind of just sniggered and I was like, well, I know that the Black experience is different. And a lot of the stuff that Patricia was saying in her introduction are things that affect Black people today. And I was trying to make that point clear. But then it dawned on me quite quickly that the legislation wasn't designed for us in mind. So even though we have the Equality Act 2010, it favours the system rather than our people. And so now when I'm doing discrimination cases, the fact of the matter is race discrimination is very hard to prove. 3% of discrimination cases that get to the final hearing is successful, just 3%. And in fact, 36% of those settle before you get to the final hearing. And part of the difficulty is because the burden of proof is on the individual. It's for the individual to prove that their experience, their feeling is grounds for discrimination. And I think that's the problem. The problem is the way that the legal system has been set up. It was not, like I said earlier, it wasn't set up with us in mind. It doesn't see us and doesn't recognize our journey, doesn't recognize our experiences. So for me, when I look at the kind of education system today, it's quite clear that it was designed for class. It wasn't designed for ethnicity. It was a system that if you're not from the system, then you have no place in the system. And that's why we see the sort of figures that we're hearing this morning. And it puts the onus on the individual to fit within the system that doesn't work for them. And so for me, I remember I had an experience in Hackney, North Hackney, where I had the opportunity, because I like to get on the ground and work with young people, work with organisations. And I had an opportunity to go to a pupil referral unit at the time. And I was talking about employment opportunities and career aspirations for these 6 young people. And today, from what I've heard, 4 of those 6 have been to prison, and two of those 4 have actually died. And so the journey for our young Black people is very, very stark. And in terms of the legal system, I think what we need to do is, what I'm working on now is challenging the legal system head on. I think we need to be brave. I think we need to be bold. And I think we need to call it out for what it is. And so the work that I'm doing behind the scenes is to work with a group of lawyers looking at how we can shine the light to the system to show the impact, the negative impact that it's having on our young people. And also I'm working in Brent on the ground, looking at how we can readdress and reframe the pupil referral units. So I was on a panel just last week interviewing the new head teacher for a new provision that's going to be open called the Roundwood Centre. And in that provision, one of the things that we've said is to ensure that the system is closely linked to community organisations. If they're closely linked to organisations that support young Black people, then we may be able to see some change. And so in that, the system itself will have the school will have community organisations embedded alongside it, and working closely together so that there is a provision straight after the school day for the young people. So hopefully, for me, that is one example of a way that we can kind of tackle the kind of injustice that we're seeing. And there is work happening behind the scenes with me and fellow colleagues looking at the discrimination laws in itself and seeing how we can shine a light on the legal system to address the injustices that it has at the moment. Thank you.
Hello, I don't know what's happened to the mic here. It seems that I'm on now. Okay, so thank you very much, Deji, for what you said. And as a lawyer, it's really heartrending to hear of the group of young people you were working with, what happened to them. But let's go onwards and upwards. And I'd like to call on board Simon from, is it Mixed Heritage? Mixed Foundation, sorry, who's out of London. Thank you, Simon. Please give your contribution now.
Hi, Patricia. I don't know where Lee is, if he's back or not. Thanks for having me on the show today. It's an honour and a privilege to be on here, all the way from Nottingham. And yeah, so I work with young people, inner city young people, involved in service use violence, crime in the criminal justice system, they're in the care system. But I see that young people are criminalised without looking at what's going on behind the actions and the behaviours. So I'm coming from a therapeutic view. So I'm looking at what's actually going on for the young person before I'm looking at what they're actually doing. So to go to schools, I've been called into schools to work with certain young people who are in behavioural support units. Firstly, I'd like to say that one of my therapists went into a behavioural support unit, and he said it could only be described as a padded cell. This is in a school. So that's setting a young person up for prison. This was a year 10 child. I've also been into other behavioural support units where a young child is sort of permanently in there. That's like his classroom, if you like. And this, I saying, what's the problem? Oh, he's kicking off. So when I've spoke to him, I've asked him what the problem is. And he said to me, well, I'm in the care system. I have no mum and dad. So when I see dads and mums coming to pick up their children and hug them and that, take them away, I get angry. So that's why I kick off. But when the person's been referred to me, they're not telling me any of this background information. They're just telling me that he's being violent. So for me, am I the only person asking this question? It really is sad. So again, the next part of the system is for them to start calling the police on him. Then not temporary excluding, permanent excluding. Then we go on to a situation down the chain where it's something like a secure children's home. Well, let me tell you about secure children's home. The secure children's home is a prison. You're locked in your room. All the staff have a bunch of keys, and that's the next stage. Then it goes to YOI, then it goes to adult prisons. So you see the pattern and you see how it goes. So coming from a therapeutic background again, why aren't these therapeutic interventions being introduced to our schools?
Happened.
And also peer-led. You know, we're peer-led. We've been through lived experience. So let's use some of that. Johnny, my children. So I've also had young people that have been out of school for 2 years. They're in the care system. So they've not been in school since year 9. And all the system is saying is that we can't get him to engage in an assessment to get into education, whether it be a PRU, a virtual school, which is usually run in a community centre or a library. So I've had to come in and say to them, right, we need to think outside the box. I'm third sector, so I'm not statutory, so I can think outside the box. So I said, let's get this young person to a KFC restaurant. I'll buy him a KFC. We'll get him to do the assessment. And he agreed to it. I brought him there. The assessor assessed him. Now he's in education 3 days a week. Now, I'm not saying I've got the magic pill to get people back into education, but I'm saying the things that I'm doing are simple and things that are being overlooked. So what I'm saying is we need to really look at what's going on for these young people instead of, you know, the racism, you know, the prejudice, the thinking everybody's the same. That's what we need to look at. And on a personal level, because I'm a father as well, I'm a father of 6, and my son went to live in London for a while, and he came back, and we got into a school in Nottingham in year 11. He had a bandana on, so we were called into school saying that he's a gang member because he's got a bandana on. So I've had a word with the head, and he's just said, oh yeah, whatever, I don't really. I said, listen, where's your cultural competency? Where is your cultural competency? After that day, when we challenged them, they even made another rule saying that if 4 or more people were together, that wasn't allowed in the playground, but it only happened to be for black boys. So again, I challenged that. But my son went on to do a degree. He's got BA Honours degree now, 2.1. So, you know, again, it's us supporting. So there needs to be more support, therapeutic support. There needs to be more support from third sector organisations that can come into the schools and try and help before it gets to the criminalisation stage. There needs to be more early intervention as well. We work with probably 15 years upwards, but we've started lowering our age now for more early intervention before it actually starts. So yeah, therapeutic all the way for me. That's all I've got to say for now. Thank you.
Oh, I just thought that was such a thing. Listen, there's lots of you out there watching on YouTube and Facebook. We want to hear your questions to the panel. This is an interactive show at the end of the day. Simon, what a profound insight. I love the story about your son coming from London with bandana and going on to get a degree. And echo questions to the panel. This is an interactive show at the end of the day. Somebody's got me on in the background. Can you mute your mics? Because I'm hearing myself twice. Thank you. And a great contribution. And the repeating theme about therapeutic intervention. Patricia said love. You said therapeutic intervention. You know, people talked about caring for our young people. I find that young people are like sort of dry seeds in a desert. They just need a little bit of attention and they flourish and flower. But for the want of that attention, they become hard and crusty. And I think that what you said there about therapeutic intervention is also right. So do send us in your questions. If you can share with other people online to encourage more people to watch this program. It's not your typical Kim Kardashian scandal clickbait program. So we're not expecting the kind of numbers that other salacious streams will no doubt get in the name of black culture. But it is educational, it is instructive. And thank you for your contribution, Simon. I'm going to go to Gwenton slowly. I'm not seeing Mr. Pink, so I'm still waiting to see if he comes online. But we've introduced to you Gwenton before. Those who watch me online will know that I've covered Gwenton's personal story in depth and have yet to do more to bring that to a conclusion. But I'm delighted to be able to introduce Gwenton slowly. Gwenton. Introduced to you, Gwenton, before. Those who watch me online will know that I've covered Gwenton's personal story in depth and have yet to do more to bring that to a conclusion.
Thanks for the warm introduction. And first of all, I want to pay homage to everyone that's on this platform and also people that are not here, such as Viva Moon, David Weaver, and also Lord Woolley for actually taking a fight and making sure that we've got someone in the house. For me, it's similar to Pat's experience and everyone else on the panel, but it gets a bit more serious when it comes to picking up the same dead bodies that you've actually seen in a people referral unit from the age of 6, because I've worked across the country as a senior practitioner and also on the front line. So sometimes the same young people you see at age 6 being prepared for prison or a people referral unit are the same young people that you end up having to move on to witness protection, or you then end up having to move into a safe house, or you see them ending up dead in the morgue. And that is the sad reality of this. And a lot of the time, as Patricia mentioned earlier, a lot of the parents don't know their rights. And if the parents don't know their rights, they then go with whatever they've been told or instructed to do, by the detriment of their own children. And I think going forward, we need to make sure that parents have access to this information, because a lot of people now within the lockdown have learned how to mobilize via the technology that they've got access to. And because of that, previously, a lot of parents was alienated towards what was going on with the young people. And if we look at history and see that the same young people that we're seeing dead on the streets or being sectioned into the mental health hospital are the same young people a lot of the times that have come through the system and been failed somewhere along the lines. The same thing like the young people that we might see carrying out terrorist acts on our streets, domestic terrorists. These are the people that have gone into custody that may not have been able to read or write or even understand the basic mathematics. And they've gone into prison, someone's fed them scriptures that they don't understand. And these are the people that are ready to die on the street. So it all comes hand in hand. And it's about everyone coming together and understand what is best practice. Because sitting down in a Victorian style school where they're teaching you to be factory workers, where there's hardly any factories, it is very difficult for people to go around and understand what is really going on. So that is my point there.
Thank you, Gwenton, making some salient points there. And look, the reality is that these kids can easily be early intervention can save these kids. And as was said on screen early on, early intervention is key, but not these meaning mentoring programs that we see. I know they're meant to do well, but we need lifelong mentoring for these kids. We need to literally adopt them and bringing them into the Black family fold. The fact of the matter is that my own experience, I was expelled 5 times. I left school without any qualifications whatsoever. And I went to jail very predictably. Came out of jail and went on to become a senior political advisor and deputy mayor in the Mayor of London. So, you know, there is potential out there. And if there are young people watching who are going through that kind of exclusion, I just want to say to you, look, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Do not let your light be dimmed by those who tell you can't do it and you'll never amount to much. You definitely can. Well, we're going to open up to broader conversation. And don't forget the survey, which is been scrolling across your screen, that was mentioned by Aspire, I think. I'm not gonna apologise for keep focusing on Black parents, Black pupils, and Black teaching assistants and Black teachers. This is the ecosystem that we've got to nurture and support to save our kids. So if they can get the survey, then we're going to make a real difference in their lives. But going back to my panelists, if we may bring them back on screen, I'm going to ask them to, we talked about solutions and the survey was one. Where are the other solutions that people can get advice in relation to exclusions? What do we know about legal advice for exclusions? I know the Black Child Agenda tends to have some facilities there for people who want that legal advice. But Deji, do you have any advice in relation to where parents can get proper advice if their child are facing these kind of exclusions?
Yeah, so if so I think parents need to, there's a list that I will send to you, Lee, after this, of what I call trusted legal law firms, right, and legal advisors. I believe also there are some community law firms that parents can tap into. So, for example, Hackney Law Centre would be one where families could approach and get the sort of kind of legal advice that they need. In terms of other legal support, that's the only ones that I can kind of think of at the moment. But if I send you a list, Lee, just afterwards, there are some solicitors firms that I know that we can kind of post up and share with the audience.
I think that's useful. Anybody else want to come in?
Yeah. In fact, I would encourage anybody who's listening to the program to get in touch with us if they have organisations that can support, that can help. For instance, I know there used to be one, long-standing one. I used to be a trustee of Communities Empowerment Network, which Gus John originally set up many years ago. Unfortunately, I don't think that is still working. That was a charity. And I think that is the point. If something is really, really important to us, we have to find ways of funding it ourselves. We cannot only rely on monies coming from government or whoever else, or the goodwill of somebody else. You know, if we need that information, either we have to do it pro bono, and or we find a way of sustainably, whether through a membership subscription, or now that things are online, we can streamline some of this advice so that we can sustain it. So, for example, one of the things that came up, we had a round table last week about looking at what needs to be done about education of Black children. And one of the things that was coming up was that we needed more Black supplementary schools. Now, if any of you have been around a long time, or as long as I have, many of us came through the Black supplementary school movement. And we know that they have died a death in terms of parents actually not wanting to fund them, not wanting to pay or not able to pay the £5 or whatever it was to keep them going. But the point is that we need spaces within our community where leadership can be built, and that we are, you know, and that our young people see positive role models of Black people who have achieved on a regular basis. So, you know, it's nothing new, but in fact, I think it's become even more urgent. So in the same way that we have to fight for instance, more Black head teachers, you know, more Black governors, this is something because most of our children are in school. So we have to tackle the whole kind of leadership and governance there. But at the other hand, we've got to create situations in our communities where we are funding the education of our children. I'll give you an example. It's a shameless plug, but the fire prep boot camp, which is going on right now. We have been forced to go online. Usually we've been operating in Hackney, face to face. And when we went online, we discovered that most of the children who come with us on Saturday mornings, that we're one of the few that hardly any of their schools are giving face-to-face lessons. So in all this lockdown, these 6 weeks, months of lockdown, that they actually haven't been getting face-to-face contact with their teachers. And they have not been properly engaging with any of the work that has been coming online. And again, that's something that you should, as a parent, if you've been in lockdown with your child, you will know whether he or she has been going online to do whatever needs to be done. So tell us that in the survey. So we can find ways, and yet we know that the children will interact with the game for hours on end. So there are ways of using digital technology and harnessing the creative talent of our millennials to make some of our African history and make some of the information that we know is important riveting and attractive to our children and to our teachers. So yeah, I think we need to take this time as an opportunity to repurpose what we're doing and link up with those who know better than, I mean, I'm a technophobe. I just put my hand to it. You know, going online was a major hurdle for me. But I know that there are millennials who are reaching out, for instance, to Fire Group, who want to help and push this survey. That, you know, Found Divine, which is a young woman who's now in Africa as well and working in London. Sonar, which is a Pan-African young platform, actually looking at promoting things that are positive for the sort of 18 to 30-year-olds. So I think many of us who have been around some time, we have to find ways of linking up with the ones who are coming through, because we have to leave a legacy. You know, we have to pass on the information, the struggles and the information, as I said, for the younger generation coming up. And therefore, we have the answers. And I'd like you, last point, to please take part in the survey, which is running along the bottom. Thank you.
I'm sure we will. And we've got lots of comments coming in, too many for me to actually go through, but they're making points about the need for early intervention, talking about the explosion of home education, which has now been another reaction to lockdown as parents look to educate their own children. Bella talks about not treating people as individuals, but tick box cultures. We're talking about, and Gwenton mentioned, the radicalization of disaffected Black young people in prisons and youth in prisons by all sorts of extremists. Another comment was around the youth workers and some of them who are unethical and involved in grooming children into criminal lifestyles. Another one suggested that we should have a UK-wide directory of services in relation to excluded children, and that might be a takeaway from this. And of course, we want to shout out to Nia, who's the what can I call him? Nia is the archetypal don of the supplementary school movement. Somebody through Supplementary School Network has been working for years. I was proud enough to get an award from them this year as a community activist, and I'd like to raise up Nia and some of the fabulous work he does. If you don't know him, he's on my Facebook page, and if he's listening, post your stuff online and we'll bring it up on screen. Nia. Another question was around small towns. How do people who live in small towns get advice? Well, luckily the internet brings the kind of connectivity that means that you can get the advice online, and we urge you to do so. I'm posting some information online for you to access child law advice. So we've got Daniel Pink back. He's looking in the pink now. Having given him his huge build up, he disappeared from our screens, but we are delighted to have Daniel Pink back with us. So Daniel, welcome back. What happened? Yeah, I know you got no Wi-Fi in Lewisham. What? Can you hear me? I don't think you can hear me. He looks like he's frozen. Can he hear me? Can I bring him in? No, obviously not. Okay. Well, those are some of the comments. Daniel's having a tough time. Those are some of the comments that we've seen. And in fact, the law centres, you mentioned Hackney Law Centre. There's a law centre almost in every borough. Sometimes they're shared, like Lambeth and Southwark have now got a single law centre, or maybe it's Lambeth and Croydon. But there are those local law centres. Across the screen, can I ask the studio to put on those links that I put on there to Childline advice, to Your Rights underneath the thing? And panelists, if you've got resources that you can guide people to, put it in the chat box and we'll bring those up on screen afterwards. Gwenton, what do you make of you heard so far? You're dealing at the front line of those children who are at most at risk of this prison, exclusion to prison pipeline. And 63% of all people in jail have been temporarily or permanently excluded. I want to say that again, 63%. And before I bring you in, just this. When I was in the mayor's office, I went to a government meeting.
For me, Lee, it's this. I think we need to take a stand, and not just take a stand when people die. It's about taking a stand within our own community and also policing ourselves first of all. Because I'll give you an example. I had a young man, known this young man from he was in year 7, which would be 11 years old. This young man was crying out for help, had ADHD or autism spectrum. The mum was more concerned with the benefits. The dad was more concerned with his part of the benefits, the cream of the benefits. And I'm there worrying about the young person's well-being. The parents are beating the young man, thinking they could beat the ADHD out of the young man or the autism out of the young man. The school's thinking they could legally beat the ADHD out of the young man by removing him or claiming the £16,000 for the young person and not giving him the mentor. By the time the young person's in year 9, that's 2 years in, the young person's on a charge for nearly killing someone because defended himself against someone else and ended up on a stabbing charge. This is year 9. By year 10, the young person survived 4 years in the school, and believe me, it was a fight. I have to give you the journey. By year 10, the young man's kicked out. No school wants this young person. So dangerous that no school wants them. So we get the young person homeschooling. And the reason why I'm raising homeschooling, even for me, I've been around Pat and certain other people, and I thought I was good at teaching. But the maths and English that these young people are learning is totally different from what I learned when I was going to school. They're drawing lines to numbers and letters become numbers and all sorts of things. And as a parent, if you don't upskill your own understanding and knowledge, you could become frustrated. So when I'm saying we need to actually take responsibility, even as parents, there's always scope for you to do some more learning and never be embarrassed if you don't understand what is actually going on around you. So the young man's getting homeschooling. The next fight came when we had to get him into a sixth form or college, because a lot of sixth form or colleges don't want people with gang ties or any sort of violence. So we get the young man into college. Within the first term of college, this young man's disappeared, gone missing, comes back after 4 weeks saying to the parents, you know what, I've had fun out there and I think that I'm good at maths now because I've been making thousands of pounds out on the street. I'm nearly 18, so there's nothing you could tell me I'm going to become a drug dealer. If this young man ends up being incarcerated, a lot of people are just going to see this young person's a drug dealer. No one's going to see the missing part of the puzzle before that. So the young man returns home. I meet with the parents, and what the parents are saying is, listen, there's nothing we could do for this young man. We need to find out how this affects our lifestyle. And where is the policing from our own community to police the parents and also police the young man? We sit back a lot of the time and look for schools or social services or the probation services or the youth offending services or these gang services, who 9 out of 10, every single one of them are just there to collect stats and cover the patches. So there's a massive hole or a big wound and they're putting small plasters on big wounds. And we sit back until something spills out and then say, wait a minute, we've got a crisis on our hands. I remember years ago when Patricia decided to start the Aspire Prep, I sat back and I said to myself, I don't understand what the hell they're doing here. And I remember a lot of people were confused. And it wasn't until after they refused to shut down, because this is something we have to mention here. Sometimes in the community, when the fight is against you, you quickly throw in the towel and say, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this no more. There's not enough money coming in. We haven't got the space to deliver. And Patricia, amongst others, refused to be defeated. And even me, as someone that's been around them from the start, only after they refused to give up the fight that I actually understood, wait a minute, what they're doing here on the weekend is actually giving people the opportunity to give their children that extra support that they need or the support that they're not getting at all. And bringing in people like myself and other people to talk to the young people is an integral part of the young people's learning. And sometimes, even when you're in a project or a part of organization from the beginning, because you can't see the foresight of what is actually being developed. Sometimes you don't understand it yourself. And a lot of people are too ashamed to say, you know, I don't understand what's going on here. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we've got in our community, that we need to use this lockdown to mobilize ourselves and move away from that. If you don't understand the vision of what someone's doing to try and save our community and preserve life, we need to ask questions. And don't be ashamed to say, no, I don't understand that bit there. And get the knowledge you need, because far too long we've seen people suffering in silence because they just don't understand. And my bit of advice will be, you know what, we don't understand this, ask a question, upskill your knowledge, use this time for learning. A lot of people have got smartphones and email addresses and don't know how powerful that is. We need to understand how we're going to move forward once the gates are open back up, because if not, we're going to be out here suffering again. And if we look at this country, even America, for example, as well, how many leaders do you see that look like you? I remember my son said to me, I ran a by-election in 2019, and my son said to me, Dad, does that mean you're going to be the Prime Minister? And I said, no, son, we're at the starting now. And I had to sit down and explain to my children, one that's nearly 20, what running an election means. And then, only then, when they were out there giving out flyers with me and knocking doors, they're like, wait a minute, Dad, this is like what Boris Johnson and that done to win. And I said, yeah, you could do this. And that is something that we need to push in our community. You could do whatever you want, even if the people have got their knee on your neck or standing on your throat. I was on bail when I ran that by-election. That's never been done in this country before. And these are the things that we need to show young people, that regardless of what pressures you're on now, you have to fight along and support each other as well, because a lot of the time when people are out here suffering, a lot of people become scared because of who the people are fighting against, where they don't want to support them. And young people are sitting there and watching that and thinking, wait a minute, why am I going to listen to you people when you couldn't support me when I was being attacked, or you don't even support your own friends? And I think that is one of the best advice that I could give, is about supporting each other and show unity when we're out there. Because if we don't show unity, people are not going to listen to what we're saying or even follow from what we're doing. So it's about having one voice, regardless of each other's egos or whatever it is, and learning how to be in the room but be invisible at the same time. Because if we can't do that, we're going to have massive problems. Don't make sense talking about education or people being incarcerated if us as people that are out here with free mind and free thinkers can't even mobilize ourselves properly. Because in other communities, if you look at the way they operate, no matter of which individual's ego, they will remain silent and let somebody lead. Yeah, a lot of the time people don't understand that the person that leads is at the most risk. So why is it that everybody wants to lead? So it's about mobilizing ourselves and coming together as one, and making sure if we don't understand something, gain the knowledge from others. So that's my input.
Seeing Daniel Pink, so I'm afraid we're going to move on. I think we just need to give some people some basic advice as well. Look, you know, I have never sent my child to a school of which I've not become a parent governor of, and I've got 9 children. Like Simon, he's got 6. I thought that was a thing of the past, but well done, Simon. I got 9 children, and I've been a school governor at every single school that they've been to, except a girls' one when they went to girls. Why? Because I needed to monitor what they were doing, not just to my children, but to all the children in that school, because then I could get a sense of how my child would fare. Also, you need to keep a diary about what's happening to your child. If your child is receiving undue attention or harassment, or their needs are not being met at school, you need to take a diary and keep a note of that. You need to know your school. You need to know your teacher, the school child's teacher. You need to get their email address, right? So you can email them, say, how is Johnny doing today? And make sure that you get the contact with them. You need to be persistently at the school. If you can't be a school governor, go and see the teacher and make sure you repeatedly tell them, any concerns with my child, here's my phone number, here's my email. You can call me, you can email. I'll be down here right away. It's when teachers understand that you are taking an active and participatory role in your child's life, that they are more sensitive, they're more likely to pay attention to your child's needs. And in relation to those things, I think it's good advice for all parents. And it's just about you've got to protect your own child from the system. And so being active in the engagement is good. And let's face it, some schools are great. Some schools, are absolutely fantastic for our kids and they do well in there. But we've shown you the stats and the facts today that shows that that's a minority experience. And you need to be involved in your kids' schooling. If you can't do it, then get your granny to do it. Get your his brother or his uncle or his auntie or his cousin to do it. But keep a monitor on your kids' activity in school. Right across the screen, you'll see a whole host of organizations that can give you advice if your child is facing exclusion. So if you're in that unfortunate position, you can see across the screen Child Advice Law Line, the Coram Centre, the Hackney Law Centre, the School Run, childadvice.org. All of these organisations are where you can access important information in relation to your rights as a parent in relation to school. So we're moving on back to the panel. Daniel Pink's not with us, but I wanted to move on to Simon in Nottingham because he was speaking about the importance of therapeutic and empathetic practice as a key element of keeping our young people motivated, keeping them feeling loved, and in doing so, keeping them focused. How do schools respond, Simon, to your urging them around cultural competence and empathetic practice? How do they respond? What's your experience?
Yeah, I'm hearing the word empathy and empowerment a lot, and I just want to say firstly, a lot of the young people, they have no dreams and aspirations, which is the main thing. When I first assess a young person and I ask him what his dream is, and he can't tell me anything, do you know how sad that is? Not even I want to be a footballer, I want to be a rapper, nothing. So without that, there's no substance. So we have to drill down into, we have to bring that out. I believe every young person has got a rough diamond inside themselves, and it's about taking that out, honing it and cleaning it and finding dreams and aspirations. That's the first thing. Within schools, I feel that a lot of schools, like anything, if outside help has to come in, a lot of people will think they're failing. But instead of thinking they're failing, they should be thinking that we're doing the best for this child by bringing expert help in to do something that we can't do. And I think also with the homeschooling, it's been difficult for all of us. Let's face it. We send our children to school, we do the homework, and that's it. But having to actually run our businesses, run our homes, do the schoolwork over COVID-19, it's been really difficult. And we work with a lot of children, as I said, who are in virtual schools. So they're just doing a couple of days in the library. So they're getting homework sent home, but they're in care homes and they just can't be bothered with it. So I think we have to take this time of COVID-19, this lockdown, to take stock, whether we be parents, professionals, working care homes, whatever. We have to take stock and we have to show these young people that right now this is the new normal. And you need to use this time as a time of reflection to actually look at what you want to do post COVID-19, see how important education is, and have a plan going forward. Without no life plan, then there's just no sense. So I believe that we really need to take stock and work with these young people. I think Patricia said something earlier, like, creative sides and that. If you're creative, let's do something creative. Let's go with what you've got. When I meet a young person, if he said to me, "Oh, yeah, I want to be a rapper," I say, "Okay, then. So you want to rap? Yeah, we can get you in the studio and that, but that's not a plan. That's not a plan. it's very rare that you're going to be able to do that. So let's work with a plan B as well. So let's go with what the young person's got so far, and then let's actually look at a plan B and look at education. I think someone just put up where the dreams and aspirations come from. If someone's in the care system and they've been rejected and neglected, they're not going to have any aspirations at all. So the dreams and aspirations will come from, again, finding what's inside them and empowering them. So they need that support around them. They need that love. They need that guidance. You need to explore together with somebody who's come with a non-judgmental approach. And that's another thing about schools, Lee, is the judgmental approach. Even when I spoke earlier about my son and that, children or our young people in our communities and schools need a non-judgmental approach in able to nurture them through to where they need to be. But I think for now, schools just need to start getting specialist people in, whatever that specialism is. They need to try more to do this work, to keep them in schools, to stop them being permanently excluded and getting into the criminal justice system.
Thank you for that. And you know, you're absolutely right about the rough diamond. I can't tell you how many times I was told you're going to go to jail. Now, actually, they were right. I did go to jail. But, you know, when I was growing up, you got arrested under sus laws, which meant a police officer could arrest you and put you in court for committing a crime to persons or property unknown. So you didn't really need any evidence. So we were criminalized. But the amount of times that I was just told that you won't amount to much, you people are all the same, you can't make it. I remember sitting in a prison bunk in Strange Ways in the early 80s, late 70s. And it was hot as hell in that Victorian jail. Stank to high heaven because you had a little tin pot to do your ablutions in your cell. And you were locked up for 23 hours a day. And I sat on my prison bunk and I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I determined from there I'll turn my life around. Fast forward 30 years later, I'm having breakfast with Nelson Mandela and Winnie Mandela. I'm interviewing the Metropolitan Police Commissioner for his job. Prison bunk to that journey. He's an incredible one. I just want to say to young people out there, trust me, the only thing that is stopping you from doing anything that you want to do is your own lack of imagination. Because don't let anybody tell you that you can't succeed. I'm living proof, and I'm not just the only one. There are others that you can succeed. People say, well, where did they get those lack of aspirations from that Simon so eloquently mentioned? Well, you see, when you live in poverty, when you're struggling for finance all the time, large-scale unemployment, it's not just economic poverty that you suffer from. It's a poverty of ambition. It's a poverty of imagination. It's a poverty of planning and resources. All of that combines with a level of ignorance around education and the importance of education into a toxic mix. And out come children who are completely traumatized by their experiences, whether that's violence in their wider community or sometimes violence in their home. Sometimes they're traumatized by the lack of love by their fathers. We do work with young people on housing estates all the time, and Gwenton and others have been there. And as soon as we start to do that keyhole brain surgery, well, I don't do it, Viva Moon does it, and I watch in admiration. And he does that keyhole therapeutic surgery. These kids start to break down at the mere mention of their answered father. That's how deeply wounded that they are, although they portray themselves as, you know, little hard guys and so on and so forth. So this whole therapeutic intervention is absolutely critical. Deji, I'm going to bring you in. I can see you sitting there reflecting on some of the stuff you've heard. What's your reflections on what you've heard so far?
Yeah, thank you, Lee. There's a number of things going in my mind. The first thing that I'm thinking about is that often we put the onus on the individual to try and change and sort themselves out. But I also believe there's a space for the system, for the schooling system, for example, So when you mentioned about having the school governors, one of the things that I've been advocating for is that if you have a school governor, yes, let's have parents join the school governors panel who would be part of that. But the school governors should be pushing for culturally competent training. You can't say you're working with our young people, our children, and then the staff that they have in schools, in mental health services, policing, are not culturally competent. And so we need that. And also we need to also shine a light on how the systemic structures, how it has an adverse effect on our young people. So looking at racial identity, for example. So I was listening to Simon, and one of the things that I had the opportunity to do was a racial identity training with a prominent psychologist. Her name is Dr. Laura Fontaine. And in that racial identity training, it looked at the white identity model, it looked at the black identity model. But the thing that I took away from that particular training was that I had internalized racism. And I think a lot of the young people that we see, a lot of the things that Gwenton was talking about as well, is the internalized racism and the young person being able to accept themselves for who they are. I remember going to an event with a young person at the BBC, a local rapper. Again, like I said, I like to do community work. And as soon as he got in the building, he couldn't speak. He just couldn't speak because he saw the environment around him and he felt uncomfortable. He felt insecure about himself, about his person. And so that's the trauma that the young people need to go through and explore. They can be who they are, they can be themselves. And I think if we can have that sort of work taking place, and a young person, like someone was saying, their aspirations, and I could see in the chat, it's about being able to accept who they are as young black men, young black women. But also the system needs work. And I really push heavily on that. So the lot of the work that I'm doing is focused on the system and how the system can change, how the system can be more accessible. I was talking to, head of mental health services, for example, talking about how can we increase accessibility for black people. And I'm saying, why don't your psychologists, well, we need an increase in black psychologists, but also are your psychologists prepared to come out and meet the black people? Because all this trying to go through your system is not working. So I think there is a space for that. So for me, that's my main reflection is let's deal with the internalized trauma that our young people are suffering from. Let them know that it's okay. Let them know that they are fine. Let them know that they are great and they can achieve what they want. Role models like the people on the panel, we need more of that. Let them see them. Let them see that you can actually succeed. You can be successful because that's what it is. And also we need to challenge the system, Lee. Definitely have to challenge the system and call it out for what it is. I think if we can do that, we're making a step in the right direction. I had the privilege of going to Atlanta 4 years ago. And Atlanta's a different kettle of fish in terms of a young black person when you're out and when you're there, in terms of black businesses, black individuals. We need a black Atlanta. We need that here. Take over Bristol, take over Liverpool. You know, we need to, like we said, have our own economy. I think once we have that and people see that, and I think some of the progression, some of the aspirations that we've been talking about on today, we will start to see those changes and that will start to filter down to our young people. So it's the systemic stuff that I'm looking at and that's what we need to challenge.
I think that partly what we're doing, and thanks for that, Deji, partly what we're doing and what Patricia's seeking to do with the survey is to bring forward the clear evidence base for systemic change, because we can use the evidence of these surveys, conducting our own surveys, not YouGov, not somebody asking us and reinterpreting that information, but doing our own surveys, carrying our own evidence and making those change. And that's why that survey is such important work. Patricia.
Yeah, it's been quite moving listening to everybody. The fact is the system is dealing with us as individuals. And if we want systemic change, we have to deal with it in unity. And this is what this report can help to leverage all our organizations to ask for the same thing. I want to go back again to how I started about solutions. People are talking about taking over Liverpool, taking over Bristol, taking over different parts to set up your own thing. That may happen. Personally, that's one of the reasons why I left this country, because I was disillusioned. I'm one of the co-founders of Black History Month. I was around when the GLC first set up Black History Month, the whole African history series, and helped to declare London, etc., Black history, worked in the GLC. And so I was there from the beginning when there was the FUS laws, campaigning, etc. And as I see it, 30 years later, we seem to be going backwards. We seem to be going backwards. And so I was disillusioned myself. And as I said, I've got 5 children. So I actually went to go and live in Africa. And in the last 3 years, as Aspire Education Group, we've invested into visiting and working in different parts of Africa, in Kenya, in Uganda, in Nigeria, and the Gambia. There's a different energy there. There's a different feel there. This is a continent that is on the rise. They are building cities there. They are building schools. They are building hospitals. You have a chance to create and add to something that can be built. Caribbean too. And on the continent, they are reaching out. We're talking about the year of return. The Caribbean, CARICOM, are also reaching out. They are recognizing that many of their diaspora have been lost and broken and are being killed in the diaspora, in the Europe, in America. And they are calling us back. They are calling us back as partners, as capacity, and as investors. So I think we also have to have a different mindset, and only just being here in these schools is limiting us, limiting our thinking. To give you an example, just last November, I went with Black Fox and with about 10 key influencers from this country, and with our partners, Kafira Foundation in Kampala, Uganda. We ran a major conference on entrepreneurialism and tech, and we launched a report called Education for Wealth, Leveraging the Fourth Industrial Revolution in Uganda. We co-authored and wrote a major report for our country. School heads were listening to us. Ministers were listening to us. Captains of business were listening to us. Here, we're still fighting to knock down the school to get a head teacher to listen to us, to keep our Black children to even get a GCSE. Look at the difference. Nothing has changed in terms of the people who did it. Whether we're here or whether we're there, we're the same people, but our reception is different and people are willing to hear what we have to say. We want to take this same leadership, this same clarity of thought, and bring this here. There's no reason to be frightened. This is our moment. We've been talking and battering up our gum for far too long. This is about trauma-informed and therapeutic work with our children, as our Gwenton and Simon have been talking. This is about African history, knowing who you are, parents stepping up and taking that leadership role in the family, stopping, loving their children, bigging them up. If you're not bigging up your child, you cannot expect anybody outside to big up your child. Thirdly, as I said, about love. I'm not talking about the lovey-dovey as well, but that tough love that knows you can do it. Other people may say that you can't do it, but you can do it. You can go for the higher paper. You can go for the A-levels. You can go for the apprenticeships. You can go make your business. We as parents have to dig deeper, and teachers, Black teachers, we have to dig deeper, as Simon and others are saying, to find out where the children are at and start where they're at, and then take it from there. There is no one deep down in there, in that diamond in the rough. There are dreams and aspirations, and we have to find them. And at the end of the day, it is about economics. If we're saying we have not got the money to invest in our children and make them have a future, then what are we saying? What are we saying? You know, people are saying they cannot afford to do the extra tuition. Let me tell you, the white middle class and upper class parents who are sending their children to boarding school or private school and paying between 20, 30 and 40,000 pounds per year for their child to make sure, you know, the 7% that go to independent school that end up as 70% of the judges, 70% of the military leaders, 50% of the top journalists and MPs. They're paying for private tuition as well. They're leaving nothing to chance to ensure that their children come away with the A stars, the A's and whatever. And so the fact that our children, despite all the odds, all the things that everybody's been talking about, the fact that they are still in school, they are still learning, they are still engaging, they are still pushing through, they are to be congratulated. They are our warriors of the future and we should support them, and we can. So, yeah, I got a bit carried away there. But, you know, really, parents, anybody who's listening, please take the survey and give your child a hug and just keep them going. Thank you. Can't hear you, Lee. That's Lee gone. We're having some problems today. As Lee's not here, can I ask, we're coming to the last 8 minutes. Can I ask Simon, perhaps your closing statements, you know, if each of us can just sort of sum up, and then I'll hand back to Lee when he comes back on. So Simon?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been really interesting today. It's been a privilege to be on the panel with all of you. And I think there's been some really interesting points. And I think we're all coming from a loving, caring point of view, which we need to do. And as you quite rightly said, Patricia, as parents, if we don't love our children and show our children that care and nurture, who's going to do it outside the home, you know? So I think we all need to do our part. I think we all do different things. And we all need to do our part as professionals, as parents, as communities. So it's all different what we do, but together, when we come together, our diversity becomes our strength. So I think we need to have more forums. I saw somebody put earlier that we need to have online forums for children, and it would be good to get the voices of our children, of our youth. I think that would be fantastic, you know, to as a person-centered kind of thing, to see what they need. So let's just keep talking. Let's just keep trying to influence decision makers. That's what we need to do. We need to influence decision makers and show them how important all this different support, therapeutic, everything is. And I can't wait to actually see and complete your survey as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. That's great. From there, let's go to Gwenton. Your final thoughts, please.
Yeah, my final thought would be more of the same. Upskill yourself, and the people that we look forward to engaging with, such as politicians, become that politician and not look up to them, and also become a school governor. Wherever there's power accessible to you, please be in that space, because only when you're in that space you could bring about change.
Thank you for that, Gwenton. And going to Deji for his final comments.
Sorry, yeah, no, again, just echoing what Gwenton was saying. Look, we all got to do our bit, you know, push, be involved, motivate. Let the young people know that it's okay. Like Patricia was saying, give them a hug. Don't let them internalize anything that the system has given them. But also, as well, I think definitely we can. Look, I'm positive. We're seeing change. It's small. We need to push. And I think what Patricia was saying about going back home, that's real. You know, and I think we need to consider other options. Our lives isn't just here, also in the UK. There is a life back home, and there's an ample opportunity for us to take that. And so, yeah, let's consider that. Let's push. Let's reconnect. Let's re-educate. Let's know our history. and bring success to our children and our children's children. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Deji. Well, can I say to the panel, it's been an absolute joy. We've had some technical difficulties with my microphone as usual. I'm going to have to sort this out. But Daniel Pink, we lost, so it's desperately sad for him. But I'm sure we'll get him back on another program sometime soon. So I'd like to say goodbye to my panel. Thank you so much for being part of Lee Jasper Drive Time. As you can see from the comments, people are just loving the energy of the show. Largely and almost exclusively, that's down to your honest candor and contributions and insights that you've been shared with us today. So thank you very much. We'll see you again soon. And thank you, the audience, for watching Drive Time. You know that we've got to invest in our children. You know, at the end of the day, I see parents who are prepared to sacrifice everything, food, everything to pay for their children's education.
Yeah.
We need to be thinking about that. When we talk about Africa, there is nothing so inspiring as taking a child to see Black society. I'll tell you, it rewires their brain instantaneously, and they come back more resilient. And let me tell you what else makes them more resilient. Speaking for myself, it was deep diving my African culture that made me resilient to racism. That's what made me even be able to succeed within a racist environment. The culture that you give your children is their superpower. That's what you don't realize. And you give your children that powerful cultural context. I stand on 10,000 years of African history. Of whom should I be afraid? Nobody. Of whom should I, aspire to? Nobody, because it's all in my culture and I know all about it. So teach your children culture. School won't teach you that.
Mm-hmm.
Transmission of culture is a parental responsibility. So my children know their culture and they survive racist predation. It's only when you don't have that anchor does the racism begin to infect your child. Trauma informed. You know, we become hardened as a consequence of the trauma of racism. We need to lose that. We need to begin to show much more love in children. And let me tell you, I don't speak from a place of enlightenment on this thing. I've had to learn this myself. Yeah. But I'll tell you something, children are the greatest teachers on God's earth if you only listen to them. And my children have taught me, and sometimes have had to shout at me to listen. And scream and cry at me to listen. But I've become a better person every time I've chose to listen. So trauma-informed is so important. Systemic change. All the panelists talked about the need for systemic change. Do you know in the 70s and the 80s, thousands of Black women turned up at the school gate to demand better education for their children? It was the biggest political movement. It was like Black Lives Matter is today. And they were only focused on getting a better outcome for their children at school. We need to go back and learn those kind of campaigning and human rights and systemic pressure on the system that we saw. And so that's it for this week. If you've not been able to see the whole program, I would ask that you share this program with your friends and your colleagues. We'll be back next Saturday with a brand new Lee Jasper Drive Time. On July the 10th, on June the, I don't know what day it is. I got lockdown lunacy. I'm completely confused. On June 10th, there's going to be a special Black Sox stopwatch. If you don't know Stopwatch is the campaigning organization that advises young people about their rights under stop and search. And in the context of what's happening with George Floyd in the US, we're going to have a stop and search special. We're going to have a witness panel. Can we put that on mute, please? We're going to have a witness panel giving evidence about young people giving evidence about their own experiences. And we're going to have an expert panel made up of people like Lord Simon, Woolley, Katrina French, the chief executive of Stopwatch. We're going to examine drugs policy. The biggest reason we get stopped and searched is for cannabis. So we're going to have release the National Drug Agency, and Transform, another drug agency that focuses on drugs policy, to say what's the link between drugs policy, stop and search, and criminalisation of our communities. That's June the 10th this week. Oh, look at this. I'm showing. Look at this. Oh, dear. Man's getting undressed live on screen. I've been in the gym, guys. I'm sorry. The T-shirt's a little too small across the chest. But we're going to be doing that on June the 10th. So look out for the Black Sox website, www.blacksox.com, or indeed on Facebook to find more information. The leaflet will probably be out today, later today, and over this weekend. And we're going to do more of this program next week, Saturday the 10th of, sorry, it's not the 10th, next Saturday, next Saturday, the 13th of June, I think that is. And we'll be back with you between 10 and 12. I'm back on tomorrow to talk about more in relation to George Floyd. So I hope to see you then. But in the meantime, this is Lee Jasper signing off for Lee Jasper Drive Time. Thanks for watching. Keep sharing the program. Peace. Love that child. Fight the system. Invest in your children's education. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Lee Jasper. This is Brixton, London, and you're watching Lee Jasper Drive Time.